a study from Stanford University has found that this work from home movement sparked by COVID-19 could generate a worldwide productivity slump. Now, our own humble Twitter audience is less certain about that. We've been running a poll on whether working from home you think makes you more productive. 60% of people say they're more productive working remotely. So obviously 40% say they're not. They're probably the 40% with small children, I would hazard a guess.
Or all day in Zoom meetings.
Yes. Either way, look, companies are now figuring out how to manage that return to work or not. Joydeep from People and Culture Strategies is joining us via Skype to discuss the legal issues around these decisions. Joydeep, as always, great to have you with us. Let's just start with a look at this study. What did you make of it? Do you think it's about right?
I do. It's always great when you read a study that endorses some views that you've held personally for a while, and I've been saying this all from the beginning of this pandemic, that this working from home movement, which is an interesting way to describe it, but the reality is that most organisations have had to embrace this to some extent. It is going to have very negative impact on productivity. It is going to have impact, and already has, on mental health of employees. And what's very interesting about this particular study from Stanford is the professor who was responsible for it was actually one of the great champions of working from home 5 years ago, and one of its biggest advocates. And what he's saying in this particular research is that there is a big difference in terms of working from home in the ordinary course of things, and at a time when he was championing its cause, versus having to do it in the current circumstances, in the current environment. I think this is the really important point, that the challenges with working from home arising from COVID are in circumstances where you have no alternative in many instances, so it's forced on you. Secondly, Kylie, to your point earlier, you've got often children to be dealing with concurrently. You've probably got someone else sharing that workspace with you. You've got a lot of uncertainty in terms of health issues and a range of other things. So it's very, very different to the productivity that might be the case in an ordinary working from home environment. So look, everyone will have their own view about how it's impacted them, but in terms of the general impact, I think on balance it will be a significantly negative one on productivity.
Joydeep, can you just talk us through the hot spots when you talk about productivity? I think about it, I remember when I used to work from home as a freelancer, my wife would come home from work and she wanted to know why the washing wasn't hung out. And I'd say, because I've been at work all day. You know, it's not something that you can do during office hours, even if you are working from home. Is it the case that we're sort of taking an extra 5 minutes to make a cup of tea, or are there other factors coming into play here?
Look, I think that's a really good example. And the funny thing is, when we all talk about the specific examples, there's a risk of being criticised for being trivial or over-dramatising things and saying, well, you know, a person, if they were at work, would be making a cup of tea or going to the bathroom and whatever else. The reality of a person's psychology when they work is very different when they're doing so in that home environment versus when they are doing so in a work environment. The reality is, when you're in your work environment, there are colleagues, there are bosses, there are business owners, there are stakeholders, clients, customers, all of those things. None of those people or individuals are there other than potentially in some manufactured way through Zoom or Skype or whatever else it might be. So that it's actually a very good example of that at least 20 to 30% decline that just comes through sloppiness, for want of a better word, or just that comfort that you have that you are in your home environment. And there are all of those distractions. I often talk about that routine that gets people going in the morning, whether it's putting your makeup on, whether it's showering, shaving, whatever it might be, whether it's dropping the kids off, having to make their lunches, the things that people have to do to get them into the headspace so that when they come to work, they're firing on, if not all cylinders, at least a few cylinders. That doesn't happen when you're working from home. And the other point, in terms of hotspot, is it is uncertainty, and the governments, with the greatest respect to them, are not helping employers in addressing this particular issue. The New South Wales government has, in the last 24 hours, responded to the Prime Minister's statement a week or so ago, which shifted the focus on work to really very much encouraging people to be getting back to their ordinary places of work. And the statement from the federal government was, well, work from home, but only if it works for you and your employer. Well, the New South Wales government, in its most recent health order, is saying an employer must allow an employee to work from home where it's reasonably practicable to do so. An employer reading that is not going to derive a lot of comfort from what most employers would be feeling right now, which is, I need to get my people back. I need to get my business humming again, and having my staff working from home as a general rule is not working for my business.
So legally, where do employers stand on this? If you're reading into that and you're saying, practically your employees, can work from home. They're not nurses or firemen or police. They do the majority of their work sitting at home on a computer, and they can then technically and practically do that as well from home. If you're an employer, what are your rights in enforcing that and saying people do have to come into the office? And B, are the rules different for, say, a small startup with less than 15 staff, or a small business, and a very large corporation?
Well, let me take the first question first. This whole idea of what's reasonably practicable is a bit of a nonsense. It assumes that all work is measured in a binary way of work being able to be done or not able to be done. It misses the whole point, and this is where that Stanford research becomes critical, of productivity. I, as a business owner, am entitled to have a view, surely, that if my people in my team are working only at 50 or 60% of productivity, and are only meeting 60, 70% of their budget, whereas if they were here, they would be making more or meeting more, then that is not good enough for me in my business. And this is the problem with the way the governments are approaching this particular issue. These notions of reasonably practicable is fundamentally disrespectful and commercially naive. So there has to be better clarity in relation to what this issue is. Now, in terms of whether there are different rules that apply, I think the reality will be that for smaller organisations, the need for collaboration, again, another point that is made so well in that Stanford research, that collaboration happens best when people are working together in person, and that contributes to productivity, of course. So in smaller organisations, the impact of people being dispersed is going to be felt more significantly than would otherwise be the case. I would be encouraging employers to be building a case within their organisations, and certainly within the decision makers in their organisations, as to why it is needed for their organisation to have their people coming into work. Now, when they do come into work, of course, all of the safe working obligations are critically relevant. And every organisation needs to make sure they're complying with that. But there's got to be more work done by employers, and pushing back on the government on this particular point, so that you are saying reasonably practicable is not just whether it works for the employee, but reasonably practicable must work for the employer as well.
Can I ask, we've got Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, sort of saying, if you want to work from home from now on, that's fine by him. Is he going to sort of rescind this in 12 months? And are we going to have a debate rather about work-life balance as work and work from home balance? Because I think it still has a place to play if you sort of one day every fortnight or one day a week where you can sort of sit down and concentrate and get stuff done, and then you come back into the team environment and you deal with all the other stuff.
Yeah, I think that the issue is not being critical of working from home per se. It's the enforced everyone working from home all the time. I think the particular example you're giving of a person who is having to do that to catch up on things that they're just not getting to because they're constantly interrupted, and there are many of us who can relate to that. Working from home works very, very well in that particular situation, whether it's one day a week, whether it's one day a fortnight, or on an ad hoc basis. But the challenge is that assumes and works well when your home is a bit of a sanctuary and you don't have those distractions, and you don't have children and partners and dogs and whatever else that may be at you constantly. So the space from which you are working has got to be conducive to it. And so work-life balance, it means different things to different people. Will this cause a radical shift in terms of how people view working? I think there will be some organisations who are probably still enjoying or seeing some upside, maybe looking at the commerciality of not having to pay rent, or potentially saving a lot on other things, and saying, look, it's not impacting us too much. But there are a lot of organisations who are saying, look, it is just really hard to keep people busy and occupied when I'm not here with them, or they're not here with me.
As always, we thank you.
Yeah.
It's going to be a tricky one over the next couple of months. You are more than welcome to come in here.
Yeah.
And talk to us about it next week.
We want you in the office.
Yes, in the office. See you next week.
Look forward to it.